I was standing in the kitchen of the house I had bought with my late husband's life insurance money when my daughter Jessica looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, you need to find your own place to live. This is my house now, and frankly, you're making my husband uncomfortable." The ceramic mug I was holding, the one that said "World's Best Mom," that she'd given me 3 Mother's Days ago, slipped from my fingers and shattered on the tile floor I had personally chosen and paid for. Find my own place to live. In the house where every mortgage payment had come from my bank account. In the house where I had signed every document, paid every property tax bill, covered every repair. In the house that legally belonged to me, but that I had foolishly put in her name because she said it would help with her credit, and because I trusted my own daughter. My name is Patricia Holloway. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything by being too generous, and how I finally found myself by learning to say no. It started 5 years ago, right after my husband David died from a sudden heart attack at 64. We had been married for 38 years, and his death left me with a paid-off house, his life insurance policy worth $280,000, and a crushing loneliness that made me desperate to feel needed. Jessica was 32 at the time, newly married to a man named Brandon, who worked in sales, and seemed charming enough at family dinners. They were renting a cramped apartment across town and constantly complaining about their landlord, about the noise from neighbors, about how they'd never be able to afford a house of their own with student loans and credit card debt. I remember the exact moment when the idea formed in my mind. We were having dinner at my place, the house David and I had lived in for 20 years, and Jessica was crying about how her landlord had raised the rent again. "Mom," she said, wiping her eyes with that vulnerability that always made my heart ache. "I just want a real home, you know? A place where Brandon and I can start our family, but we'll be renting forever at this rate." Brandon put his arm around her and looked at me with what I thought was genuine affection. "Your daughter deserves better than this, Patricia. She deserves stability." That night, I lay awake thinking about the life insurance money sitting in my account. David had left it for me to live comfortably in my retirement, to travel, to enjoy the years we should have had together. But what good was money when I was alone in this big house full of memories? What if I could use it to help my only child achieve her dreams? What if this was my purpose now? To be the mother who made everything possible for her daughter? The next morning, I called Jessica with my proposal. "What if I bought you a house? We could find something nice in a good neighborhood, and you and Brandon could live there without the burden of a mortgage." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she screamed. Actually screamed with joy. "Mom! Oh my God, are you serious? This would change our entire lives. You're the best mother anyone could ever ask for." We found the house 3 weeks later. A beautiful 3-bedroom Craftsman with hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen, and a backyard perfect for the grandchildren I hoped would someday play there. The asking price was $315,000, which meant I'd have to use all of David's life insurance plus $35,000 from our savings. When I hesitated at the real estate office, Jessica grabbed my hand. "Mom, this is the one. I can feel it. This is where Brandon and I are going to build our future, where your grandchildren are going to grow up. Please, Mom, you're the only one who can make this happen." I signed the papers. But here's where I made my first catastrophic mistake. Jessica said it would be better if the house was in her name from the start. "Mom, you're getting older, and if something happened to you, it would be complicated legally. Plus, this will really help establish my credit. And it's not like you're losing anything, I'm your daughter. What's mine is yours, right?" It sounded reasonable at the time. She was my flesh and blood. Why would I need legal protection from my own child? The mortgage was $2,100 a month. I told Jessica I'd cover it for the first year while they got on their feet financially. That 1 year turned into 2, then 3, then 5. Every time I gently suggested they start contributing, there was a crisis. Brandon's sales commissions were down. Jessica had unexpected medical bills. They needed a new car because the old one broke down. The air conditioning unit died and needed replacing. Could I cover that $6,000 expense? The roof started leaking. That was another $8,500. The fence fell down in a storm. $3,200 more. I calculated it once, sitting alone at my kitchen table with my bank statements spread out in front of me. In 5 years, I had spent $178,000 on that house. The mortgage payments, the property taxes, the insurance, the repairs, the furniture Jessica said she desperately needed, the landscaping that Brandon insisted would increase the property value. $178,000 from the money David had left to secure my future. I was living on my Social Security check of $1,800 a month while making sure my daughter had granite countertops and a finished basement, but I told myself it was worth it. I was building a legacy. I was ensuring my daughter's happiness. I was the kind of mother who sacrificed everything for her child. Isn't that what good mothers do? I should have seen the signs earlier, like when I suggested having Thanksgiving at my house, meaning the house I had bought. And Jessica corrected me sharply. You mean my house. Mom, you can come visit, but let's be clear about whose house it is. Or when I mentioned needing to hire someone to fix my leaking bathroom and Brandon said, well, Patricia, maybe if you didn't have such expensive taste, you could afford your own repairs. Expensive taste? I was living on leftovers and wearing clothes I'd owned for a decade while they ordered takeout 4 nights a week. The real breaking point came 6 months ago. My furnace died in January, during a cold snap that sent temperatures to 15 degrees. I called Jessica, shivering in my house with 3 blankets wrapped around me, and asked if I could stay with them for a few days while I arranged repairs. The pause before she answered should have told me everything. Mom, that's not really a good time. Brandon has been stressed with work, and we value our privacy. Can't you just get a space heater or something? I got the space heater. I also got pneumonia from sleeping in a 50-degree house for a week while I waited for a furnace repair I couldn't afford because all my money was going to their mortgage. I spent 4 days in the hospital, and Jessica visited once for 20 minutes, mostly to tell me about a vacation to Mexico she and Brandon were planning. When I got out of the hospital, weak and with $8,000 in medical bills even after insurance, I made a decision. I was going to move in with Jessica and Brandon. Not forever, just until I recovered and got back on my feet financially. It was, after all, my house. I had never signed any document saying I couldn't live there. Legally, morally, practically, I had every right. I called Jessica and told her my plan. Another long pause. Then, Mom, we need to talk about this in person. Come over for dinner tomorrow night. I should have known from her tone that something was wrong, but I was tired, sick, and desperately lonely. I showed up the next evening with a store-bought pie, all I could afford, and a small suitcase packed with essentials. Brandon opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Patricia, come in. Jessica's just finishing up in the kitchen. The house smelled like the expensive pot roast I had taught Jessica to make, the one that required ingredients I could no longer afford for myself. I sat at the dining table, the $2,400 table I had bought them as a housewarming gift, and waited. Jessica sat down across from me, and Brandon stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders like they were presenting a unified front. Mom, Jessica began, and I noticed she didn't call me Mommy like she used to when she wanted something. We need to talk about boundaries. Boundaries. The word hung in the air like a threat. Brandon and I have been talking, and we think it's important that we maintain our independence as a couple. We're building our life together, and we need space to do that without parental interference. She said, parental interference the way someone might say, cockroach infestation. I'm not trying to interfere, I said quietly. I just need a place to stay for a little while. I'm still recovering, and my house is falling apart because I can't afford because you made bad financial decisions, Brandon interrupted. Jessica and I have been very grateful for your help, Patricia, but your money problems aren't our responsibility. My money problems. The ones that existed because I had given them every spare dollar for 5 years. This is the house I bought, I said, my voice trembling, with my husband's life insurance, with my savings. I've paid every bill for 5 years. And we're very grateful, Jessica said in that syrupy tone people use when they're about to say something cruel. But the house is in my name, Mom. Legally, this is my property. You gave it to me. You can't take it back now just because you regret your generosity. I don't regret helping you, I whispered. I just need help now. I'm your mother. That's when Jessica said it. The words that would replay in my mind for months. Mom, you need to find your own place to live. This is my house now. And frankly, you're making my husband uncomfortable. The mug slipped from my hands. I watched it shatter on the floor. Pieces of ceramic scattering like my illusions about my daughter's love. making him uncomfortable? I repeated. I bought this house. These floors, these walls, this roof over your heads, I paid for all of it. No, Brandon said firmly. You made a gift. You chose to be generous. That was your decision. The house belongs to Jessica now, and we have the right to decide who lives here. And we're deciding that you need to find your own place. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to correct him, to defend me, to say this was all a misunderstanding. Instead, she nodded. Mom, you've always been a little too clingy. Even Dad used to say so. You need to build your own life instead of trying to live through mine. David had never said that. Ever. It was a lie so cruel, so calculated, that it took my breath away. I stood up from the table, my legs shaking. When do you want me out of your life completely? Should I stop paying the mortgage too? Stop covering the property taxes? Stop funding your comfortable lifestyle? Jessica's face changed. The mask of false concern dropped, and underneath was something cold and calculating. Let's not be dramatic, Mom. We can still have a relationship, but on our terms, in our space. You're welcome to visit, maybe once a month or so, with notice. Visit the house I bought. Visit my house, she corrected sharply. I walked out without another word. I didn't take my suitcase. I didn't finish the conversation. I simply left, drove home in a daze, and sat in my cold house wondering when I had become so disposable to the child I would have died for. That night, something inside me broke. Not broke like shattered, broke like a spell lifting. I had spent 5 years thinking I was investing in love, in family, in legacy, but I hadn't been investing. I had been financing my own irrelevance. At 3 a.m., I got out of bed and went to my computer. I started searching. Can I get my house back if it's in my daughter's name? Elder financial abuse laws. How to protect yourself from family exploitation. The more I read, the angrier I became. This wasn't just ungratefulness. This was theft dressed up as a gift. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I was going to fight back. My first call Monday morning was to a lawyer named Margaret Chen, who specialized in elder law and family financial disputes. Her office was in a modest building downtown, and when I walked in with my folder of bank statements, receipts, and mortgage documents, she took one look at my face and said, "Let me guess. Your kids?" I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Mrs. Holloway, I see cases like yours twice a week. Parents who give everything to their children and then get discarded when they need help in return. The legal situation is complicated because you put the house in her name willingly. Can I get it back? Maybe. We can argue undue influence, that she manipulated you into signing over property while you were grieving. We can document that you've been paying all expenses, which might support a constructive trust argument, but it's going to be expensive and emotionally brutal. Your daughter will fight back. How much?" I asked. "Legal fees could run $25,000 to $50,000 if it goes to trial. Do you have that?" I didn't. I had maybe $8,000 left in savings after the hospital bills. But then Margaret said something that changed everything. However, we could start with a formal demand letter. Sometimes when entitled children realize their parent has legal representation, they reconsider their position. We could demand either that she transfer the house back to you or buy you out at fair market value. The letter cost $500. $500 I could manage. She drafted the letter that afternoon. It detailed every payment I had made, calculated the total amount, $178,000, and demanded that Jessica either return full ownership to me or pay me $200,000, the appreciated value of the home, within 30 days. It also stated that if she refused, we would file a lawsuit for fraud, undue influence, and constructive trust. I signed it with a hand that shook with rage and satisfaction. Margaret mailed it certified mail, requiring signature. 3 days later, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Jessica. I didn't answer. Let her feel what it's like to be ignored. Finally, she showed up at my house, pounding on the door. "Mom, open up! We need to talk about this ridiculous letter. You're making a huge mistake." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What mistake would that be, Jessica? Hiring a lawyer? Or trusting you in the first place?" Her face was red with anger, not embarrassment or shame. "You're really going to sue me? Your own daughter? Over a house you gave me? A house I paid for completely, and that you promised I'd always be welcome in. A house where you told me I make your husband uncomfortable. A house you've locked me out of while I continue to pay every bill. We never asked you to pay for everything. The lie was so blatant I actually laughed. You asked me every single month. You called crying about money troubles. You guilt-tripped me about wanting your children to grow up in a nice home. You manipulated me for 5 years, and now you're shocked that I want what's rightfully mine. Brandon appeared behind her. Patricia, you're being unreasonable. That letter is legally meaningless. The house is in Jessica's name. You have no claim to it. Then I guess we'll see what a judge says. By the way, effective immediately, I'm stopping all mortgage payments, property tax payments, and insurance payments. Good luck keeping your house without my money. Jessica's face went white. You can't do that. The mortgage payment is due in a week. We don't have $200 just lying around. That's terrible, I said flatly. Maybe you should get jobs that pay better. Or stop spending $200 a week on takeout. Or sell that $40,000 car Brandon just bought. Figure it out. You're adults with your own house, remember? You don't need your clingy mother interfering. I closed the door on their stunned faces and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. But I also felt more alive than I had in years. The next week was chaos. Jessica left voicemails ranging from furious to weeping. Brandon sent threatening texts about how I was abandoning my own daughter. They even tried to get my sister Linda involved, telling her I was having some kind of mental breakdown and needed intervention. Linda called me, concerned. Patty, Jessica says you're suing her over the house. What's going on? I told her everything. The whole story, including the part where Jessica told me to find my own place in the house I bought. Linda was silent for a long moment. Then, Jesus, Patty, I tried to tell you years ago that you were giving her too much. Every time we talked, it was, Jessica needs this, or Jessica needs that. You've been broke for years while she's been living like a queen. You never said anything. Would you have listened? You've always been blind when it comes to that girl. Even when she was a teenager and stole money from your purse, you made excuses for her. I had forgotten about that. Forgotten about a lot of things, apparently. Linda continued. Look, I'll testify for you if you need it. I've watched you drain yourself dry for 5 years while she took everything and gave nothing back. It's financial abuse, Patty, even if she is your daughter. Having Linda's support meant everything. She was the practical one, the one who hadn't let her kids walk all over her. She gave me the name of her financial advisor, a woman named Ruth Kowalski, who specialized in helping people rebuild after financial trauma. Ruth's advice was straightforward. Stop all payments to them immediately. Cancel any credit cards they have access to. Document every expense you've paid on their behalf. And prepare for them to get nasty, because entitled people always do when the money stops flowing. I followed her instructions to the letter. I called the mortgage company and explained that I was no longer authorized to make payments on the property. I called the insurance company and removed myself as the payer. I blocked Jessica and Brandon's numbers after saving all their threatening messages as evidence. For the first time in 5 years, my Social Security check was entirely mine. $800 that I could spend on my own needs. I got my furnace properly repaired. I bought groceries without checking prices obsessively. I even splurged on a haircut at a real salon instead of the budget place I'd been using. Small things, but they felt like acts of rebellion. 2 weeks after I stopped payments, Jessica and Brandon showed up with a different approach. They brought flowers and apologies. Mom, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face, we've been awful. You're right about everything. We took advantage of your generosity and we're so sorry. Please, can we work this out as a family? I looked at the flowers, cheap grocery store carnations, not even my favorite lilies, and felt nothing. Work what out? We want to make this right, Brandon said in his smooth salesman voice. We can't afford to buy you out at $200,000, but what if we paid you back over time? Like $500 a month? I did the math in my head. $178,000 at $500 per month would take 356 months, nearly 30 years. I'd be 97 years old when they finished paying me back for a house I had bought outright. No, I said simply. Mom, please. Jessica grabbed my hands. We'll lose the house. The bank is already sending late notices. We can't afford the mortgage without your help. You should have thought about that before you told me to find my own place to live. I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. Brandon had just gotten on my case about his mother wanting to visit, and I took it out on you. Please, Mom, don't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply refusing to continue doing everything for you. Brandon's mask slipped. You know what? Fine, keep the house. We'll just trash it before we leave. Good luck selling it after we're done with it. That would be destruction of property, which is a crime. But go ahead. It'll look great in front of a judge. They left without the flowers. The lawsuit moved forward. Margaret filed a complaint citing fraudulent conveyance, undue influence, and unjust enrichment. The local newspaper somehow got wind of the story, probably from a clerk in the courthouse, and ran a piece titled, Mother Sues Daughter Over $300,000 Home. The comments section was brutal, split between people calling me a vindictive witch who wouldn't let her daughter be independent, and people saying Jessica was an entitled parasite who deserved everything coming to her. I stopped reading comments. What I didn't stop doing was building my case. Margaret deposed Jessica and Brandon, and their testimony was a gift. Under oath, Jessica admitted I had paid every mortgage payment for 5 years. She admitted I had paid for repairs. She admitted telling me to find my own place. When Margaret asked why she thought that was acceptable after I'd given her a house, Jessica's answer was, She's my mother. It's her job to help me. Brandon was worse. He actually said Patricia made her choices. If she has buyer's remorse now, that's not our problem. The judge was a woman in her late 60s named Justice Elizabeth Warren, no relation to the senator. She read through our documentation with an increasingly stern expression. When it came time for oral arguments, she asked Jessica a single question. Ms. Holloway, do you believe your mother has any right to live in the home she purchased for you? Jessica's lawyer had clearly coached her. Your Honor, the home was a gift. My mother's name is not on the deed. She has no legal right to occupy it without my permission. And you denied her permission after 5 years of her paying all expenses? Your Honor, my husband and I need our privacy as a couple. Justice Warren looked at me. Mrs. Holloway, what do you want as an outcome? I stood up, my knees shaking. Your Honor, I want either the house returned to me or to be paid fair market value for it. I also want compensation for the 5 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and repairs I paid after the house was deeded to my daughter. I was told I would always be welcome there, that it would be our family home. Instead, I was locked out and told to find my own place when I needed help. And if your daughter can't pay you, then I want the house back so I can sell it and recover what I invested. The judge took 2 days to issue her ruling. When Margaret called to tell me, I could hear the smile in her voice. We won. The judge ruled that while the initial transfer was legal, your daughter violated the verbal agreement that you would always be welcome there. She also found that your continuous payment of all expenses created a constructive trust. Essentially, you maintained an ownership interest through your financial contributions. Jessica has 60 days to either pay you $195,000 or transfer the deed back to you. I sat down hard on my couch. We won? You won, Patricia. Justice prevailed. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like I had been holding my breath for 5 years and could finally exhale. Jessica called that night, hysterical. Mom, the judge is stealing my house. You have to do something. Tell them you made a mistake. I did make a mistake, I said quietly. I trusted you. I believed you when you said you loved me. I thought being a good mother meant sacrificing everything for you, even when you gave nothing back. I can't come up with $195,000. We'll be homeless. You have 2 months to figure it out. Get a loan, sell the house yourself, and keep whatever's left after you pay me. Ask Brandon's parents for help, you know, the ones who were too intrusive to stay with you. Figure it out like the independent adult you claim to be. I hate you, she screamed. You're a terrible mother. Dad would be ashamed of you. That one cut deep, but I held firm. Your father would be ashamed of what you became. A user, a manipulator, someone who sees her mother as nothing more than a bank account. I hung up and blocked her number again. 60 days later, I got a cashier's check for $195,000. Jessica had managed to refinance the house with Brandon's parents co-signing the loan. The deed stayed in her name, but I had my money back. Most of it anyway. Not the full $178,000 I'd spent, but enough to rebuild my life. I took that money and made decisions David would have been proud of. I paid off all my medical debt. I fixed everything in my house that needed repair. I put $100,000 in a retirement account that only I could access. And with the remaining $40,000, I did something I'd never done in my entire life. I traveled. I went to Italy, to the Amalfi Coast, David, and I had always dreamed of visiting. I went to Ireland and traced my grandmother's family roots. I went to New Zealand and hiked through landscapes that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was 67 years old, and for the first time since David died, I was living for myself. When I returned home, I found a letter in my mailbox. From Jessica. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Mom, it read, I've been in therapy for 3 months. My therapist says I have issues with entitlement and boundary violations. She says what I did to you was a form of financial abuse. I'm writing this because she says I need to acknowledge the harm I caused, even if you never forgive me. You were right. I used you. I took advantage of your grief and your love for me. I told myself I deserved everything you gave me, that it was your job as a mother. But it wasn't. You didn't owe me a house or 5 years of payments or any of it. You chose to be generous and I chose to be greedy. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't expect you to forgive me or even respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did, and I'm trying to become a better person. Jessica. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to believe she meant it. The mother in me. The one who remembered rocking her to sleep as a baby, teaching her to ride a bike, cheering at her high school graduation, wanted to call her and say everything was forgiven. But the woman I had become, the one who had learned painful lessons about self-worth and boundaries, knew better. An apology didn't erase 5 years of abuse. Therapy didn't undo the damage. Words were easy. Changed behavior over time. That was what mattered. I put the letter in a drawer and didn't respond. 6 months later, I ran into one of Jessica's friends at the grocery store. She told me Jessica and Brandon were struggling with their mortgage payments now that they had to handle them alone. They'd taken second jobs. They'd stopped eating out. Brandon had sold his expensive car. They were learning, slowly, what it meant to live within their means. I felt no satisfaction in their struggle. But I felt no guilt either. They were adults. This was their lesson to learn. As for me, I joined a book club. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other mothers learn to set boundaries with their adult children. I made real friends, not people who wanted something from me, but people who genuinely enjoyed my company. I dated a bit, though nothing serious. I discovered I liked being alone, being independent, being free. On the anniversary of the day, Jessica told me to find my own place. I sat on my newly refinished back deck with a glass of wine and watched the sunset. My house was warm. My bills were paid. My retirement was secure. My life was my own. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago. Broken, desperate, willing to accept crumbs of affection from her own child. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, less willing to sacrifice herself on the altar of other people's expectations. My name is Patricia Holloway. I am 68 years old, and I have finally learned that love shouldn't cost everything. That being a good mother doesn't mean being a doormat. That the most important person I need to take care of is myself. Did I lose my daughter in the process of finding myself? Maybe. But I gained something more valuable. My dignity, my financial security, and my freedom. And that, I've discovered, is worth more than any house could ever be. If you've lived through something similar, if you've given everything to someone who gave nothing back, I want you to know you're not alone. And it's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to say enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to support me in creating more content about financial boundaries and family relationships, any donation is appreciated. And please, share your own story in the comments. What would you do in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts. For more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and setting boundaries, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember, you are worth more than what you can give to others. With love and hard-won wisdom, Patricia.